Again, welcome everyone. Ganesh Kirti, CEO, founder at TrustLogix. Uh, Welcome to the webinar, Data Sprawl. We are talking about this is very relevant and important topic in the data world we're living today. Uh, we are very lucky to have great panelists here. I'll introduce them in a minute. Hopefully everyone can see the slides. Okay, just want to make sure that slides are visible as well. Thank you, Alexi. Uh, so just on the topic, the context for the topic, we are talking about data sprawl. What causes data sprawl? Uh, as many of you know, the reason that you're attending in this webinar, I'm assuming, is you're already dealing with some sort of data and security combination of that, and modernizing your data environments. So it's really that's what we see talking to hundreds of companies, that we work with, and it's becoming, it's a given. The data sprawl is given. The multi cloud, multi data platform is given in the world today, and the more importantly, the rise of data mesh, data products and data warehouses and AI applications in industries like healthcare and finance has resulted in decentralized data architectures, and wherein the data is distributed across different data systems, platforms, and applications. In addition, the increasing adoption of data clouds like Snowflakes and Databricks, data cloud environments like that, enables easy and quick data sharing and collaboration. But without proper governance and control mechanisms in place, this is becoming a nightmare, uncontrolled data proliferation. Moreover, the lack of awareness of potential risks with the data sprawl and compliance requirements and security vulnerabilities associated with the data sprawl further complicates this problem. And it becomes very crucial for data security professionals and data architects to recognize this challenge very early on in the journey and take proactive measures to manage and secure data effectively and get the value out of data, get the more value from the data. So that's what we're going to talk about today in this webinar. And as I said, we are lucky to have deep experts in this space. We've got Alexi and Mark Nelson. The first I want to introduce Alexi, and then I'll introduce Mark. Uh, Alexi is a top industry analyst at Kippinger Cole. Alexi, welcome.
Oh, thank you very much, Ganesh. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you here, Alexi. A little bit about Alexi is Alexi has been a leading analyst with specific focus on cybersecurity and artificial intelligence. At Kippinger Cole, he covers a broad range of security topics, from database security, application and API security, to security analytics, information protection, and AI-based security automation. And again, Alexi has been very, very active on these topics, and recently he has published a data security leadership compass. This is an extensive research he has done on various data security platforms in the market. Again, Alexi, thank you so much for joining us. Next, I want to introduce Mark. I'm really excited having Mark here. I've worked with Mark many years ago in the past. This is really exciting for having this conversation with Mark here. Mark, welcome to the webinar. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Ganesh. It's great to see you. It's great to be here this morning.
Yeah. So a little bit of background on the Mark itself. Mark brings in decades of experience building products, and I know firsthand he's been a top architect, he's got experience building teams and businesses. His role with Moderna, he's transitioned from his most recent role as CEO of Tableau. Now he's at Moderna, and at Moderna, he's helping build great products and teams, and he focuses on evaluating new investments and advising portfolio companies and their leaders. Mark, again, thank you so much. So, Vicky, if you can go to thank you. So what we can cover, the folks here today is, on the agenda side, we're going to talk about the challenges associated with the data sprawl, associated with the data, the consumption of data happening across these different data platforms. We're going to talk about the regulations and compliance and complexities around that. That's what we're going to cover first. And then the second topic we're going to cover is the strategies, how to address these challenges and the processes and the implementation techniques. We're going to cover that as well. And then the third, we're going to have time for Q&A as well. So with that said, what I want to do is I want to first kick it off, hand over to Alexei to talk to us about challenges that he had seen that in his work, and then we go over other challenges first. Alexei, over to you.
Well, thanks, Ganesh. Weren't we going to have a poll?
So what we're going to do is we have done initially some polling, Alexei. What we have seen is, majority of the responses we got is most of them said their data is moving into the cloud, modernizing part of the data strategies. And then, they've got, some percentage of the people said they have data in both hybrid clouds, on-prem and clouds. So that's what we are seeing. Most of the people said that the data is moving now. It's going into the cloud for various use cases. So that's what we have done. So we decided we're just going to talk about that and then just, avoid the poll again here.
Okay, fair enough. Although, of course, trusting people's own opinions, like on their self-assessment, is probably not always a good idea because, they say trust but verify. Anyway, we are going to talk about data sprawl today, but before we talk about the actual challenges and issues and hopefully solutions for that, let's just stop for a second and think is data sprawl even the root cause of all our problems? I would argue not really. Data sprawl is actually a consequence of some wrong or bad decisions probably done decades ago. And one of those bad decisions was back then telling the people that their data is their crown jewels. You've heard that probably thousands of times. Data is the new gold or new oil or even new printer ink, as at least judging by the price per milligram. And I would argue this was not just a lie in a way. It was an extremely dangerous and misleading concept, which led to at least some of the challenges we are facing now. Because obviously, when you firmly believe that data is the new gold, you would start collecting as much of the data as possible without considering the consequences, the dangers, the costs, including hidden costs and so on. So yes, data is not the new oil, and hopefully we can prove it during this webinar. But simply, it's not true because most data does not actually have any intrinsic value of its own. It will only become useful when there is some business tangible value derived from it through some specific processes, which can be automated, which can be AI-based or manual, doesn't matter. Data has to actually live and breathe and work to deliver something useful. Some data can actually be very toxic, and I'm talking almost literally because we all know about GDPR and private personal identifiable information, but there is a lot of other kinds of data which should be considered a liability, not a value, because not an asset, because the cost of storing and managing that kind of data is actually higher than any potential value that could be derived. So if you're not handling your data properly, you can face a lot of problems. And yeah, sometimes you not just have to secure your data from bad actors out there, you actually have to protect yourself and your employees from the bad data. And let's kind of elaborate on that a little bit. And by the way, I know that this webinar is supposed to be like an interactive discussion, so feel free to stop me at any time, because I'm fairly sure that everyone has their own opinion on that. So can we please move to the next slide? Yes, the second point I would want to make is that data does not exist in vacuum. Data has to move, data has to be transformed, data has to do some legwork to actually start producing value. And this work doesn't just happen in one place. whether it's on-prem or in a cloud or in multiple clouds, data moves a lot. Data is transformed a lot. And on this picture, I just tried to kind of show what it usually looks like. You start from data sources, you move through various storage areas, processing pipelines, machine learning, of course, nowadays, AI, analytics, reporting. These are all different systems running in different clouds, operated by different teams, secured by different tools, or even not secured at all. And again, if you just click next for a second, you just, multi-cloud is a serious multiplier here, because with every added cloud store, you only increase your complexity. And we all know that complexity is the worst enemy of security. Okay.
So Alexei, if you let me ask a question. So, this makes sense. And, in your experience, right, what does it look like for a typical environment? Are we talking about 5 databases, 15 databases, 100 databases? What's the scale we are talking about here?
Well, judging from our own experience working with our customers, it can vary dramatically. I mean, some companies would just claim, okay, yeah, we are, let's say, an Oracle shop, or we do everything with Snowflake or somewhere else. But it usually doesn't work like that. More often than not, they just never realize how complicated their own data landscape really is. And we also know customers who would say, no, we actually want to be on the bleeding edge of technology. We will use the best of breed specialized database engine for every purpose. We would run a specific bestest time series database of all of them. We would use very specific data lakes and vector databases for AI embedding and stuff like that. So it can vary dramatically, both in scale, from dozens to tens of thousands of instances, and in complexity. And again, the biggest unifying factor, if you will, that many of those companies just don't know how complicated it all is.
Yeah, I think, Mark, perhaps I would love to see your commentary on this as well. So you've got a lot of exposure to these customers in your past experience. You've got analytics, you've got data lakes and warehouses. There are so many use cases. Love to see your comment, is in this picture, right?
Yeah, for sure. Building on what Alexei said. Yeah, the absolute number varies widely, but the short answer is it's always more than you think. It's more than businesses think they actually have. It's always more than you plan for. Like, no matter how much you want to say, like Alexei said, like, no, we're a Snowflake shop. We're going to standardize on Snowflake. Sure, maybe a majority of your data ends up in Snowflake, or at least a majority of your curated data ends up in Snowflake. That is not where all of your data ends up, or even a majority of your actual data ends up. You end up with special purpose databases, right? Your marketing team goes off and buys another MarTech tool. You get Google Analytics. You throw in a GraphDB for something. Now with the rise of generative AI, you're going to throw in a vector database somewhere, right? Like, you've got your real-time flows. And then the biggest data source we continued to see at Tableau was Excel spreadsheets. Like, honestly, still was a huge source of data that people would pull in. And so, A, the sprawl is real. B, like, it's a feature, not a bug, right? Like Alexei was saying, data only has use when it's in the context of the business. And the reality of the business is it runs in all these different places, and you want people to be bringing the data that is most useful for them in their day-to-day job. The side effect of that is they're going to bring in other data sources, and they're going to bring in other data stores, right? So the right answer can't be, I'm going to squash the extra data stores and I'm going to shove it down into a centralized store. It kind of defeats the purpose of making your data useful, right? So this is both a practical reality of how this is going to happen. And as we also was mentioned, the modern data stack, the beauty is it's so easy to use. It's so easy to get your data in there. The curse is it's so easy to get your data in there. It's so easy to use, like it ends up all over the place. But again, that's a feature, right? Like, you want to enable this. If you really want self-service analytics, if you really want the business to be able to use its data, you need to be able to enable this and not try to squash it. But then to balance with the rest of the conversation, you have to figure out how to do this responsibly and have the right level of governance on it.
We'll come back to that in a second. Yeah, so Alexei, please continue. Thank you.
As Mark just said, basically data sprawl is not the problem. Data sprawl is actually the solution to a much bigger problem. It's a hugely misguided solution, of course, but data sprawl occurs when a business wants to derive value from the data, but there is a friction. It cannot do it with existing tool. So the obvious solution is to throw in a new tool. And so basically data sprawl it's a natural process. It's like, erosion of a landscape. You cannot stop it. You cannot really kind of fight it. You have to learn to live with it, and you have to introduce controls to prevent it where it hurts the most. And of course, there is definitely more than one way to do it. You could tackle it from one end, as I mentioned earlier, just collect less data, and you would automatically have less data sprawl. Or you have to know where your data lives and how it moves, how it evolves all the time. And for that, of course, you'll have tools like the one we will be talking later. And basically, data sprawl is not an exception. It's not a root cause. It's just a new normal. You have to live with it. You have to deal with it somehow.
Yeah. So on the Alexei, on this, we talk about failures and data breaches here. The slide that you're presenting, and then also I see the challenges, right? That in the multi-cloud environments, I think one of the things we heard, right, is this entitlements and privileges. There's no industry standard today, right? You just talked about so many different use cases across multiple data platforms, and it's really hard to implement access controls. And I see here you talk about privileged accounts with access to the cloud, right? It's really hard. Mark, anything that you want to add in here? How would people handle this on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. Today it is a very, very fractured world, right? There are no standards. There is no one tool that really helps make this all come together. There traditionally just has not been. Because you have all these use cases about how you're accessing the data. You have all of these data stores that are slightly different in how they handle these permissions. And as you said, every tool provides something. I mean, Tableau, we provided access rules as well. And that was great. And we had customers who used it very effectively, but that was just for Tableau, right? Like that solved the use case for when you were coming through Tableau. It didn't do anything for you when you were accessing that data in some other way. You can go from the other way up, like you can start from your databases and build your way up. But then again, you're starting from the root, not from the end use case of where it is. You're not taking care of, how that data then gets pulled out of Snowflake, gets transformed in somewhere else, joined with something else. So it is very bespoke. It is, customers are usually using spit and bubble gum and some combination of a whole bunch of different mechanisms combined at the end of the day with a human process to try to deal with this, because of a lack of a really holistic way to address the problem. And then all of that is separate from, you've got lawyers out there who are writing really nice data policies on how your company is supposed to be handling data and what the intent is, but then proving that your actual implementation of your permissions are meeting what it is you wrote down as your policy is nearly impossible.
And of course, the biggest challenge is always not the technology. It's, as you just mentioned, in the end, it's just people and their business goals. Even if you're looking at the same slide now, you can see that the actual concerns of the management of the board level is never about, is our data security platform good enough? It's more like, what can we do to prevent a compliance failure, or how do we stop a data breach, or ideally not let it happen in the first place, and how do we ensure business continuity? And of course, a lot of people, especially non-technical people, they never see security tools as enablers for those scenarios, right? At best, security and compliance is a chore. It's a money sink, and it does not do. And when it's supposed to do something, it's too late. So I guess the biggest challenge is, how do we kind of make those two groups of people, the stakeholders, talk the same language. It has to be done on a process and policy level, sure, and there are those nice lawyers for that, but it somehow should be able, I mean, there should be tools that are able to understand that language and automatically, ideally, of course, automatically translate it into real security and compliance controls. And again, this is what we will be discussing today.
Yes. Okay.
And of course, we had to add a slide on compliance as well. This is just an illustration. We don't have to go into the details of what Schrems 2, for example, means, or whether you are affected by the European GDPR regulation. The problem is basically GDPR was just the first step, and now most countries and even individual states in the US, for example, are planning to adopt similar regulation. And the point here is that compliance is no longer a standalone discipline. Compliance can no longer be addressed with spreadsheets and yearly reviews. Compliance failures are not only costly nowadays, they can even like bring your entire business to a halt. This whole Schrems 2 judgment is basically saying that no, if you are a company based in Europe, you are not allowed to store your data in an American cloud, period. And if you continue to violate this regulation, well, your entire cloud business will just stop working because you would have to pull the plug. Or you have to deal with security controls, which are compatible with those legal decisions. And we are basically, I mean, we in Europe are still operating in this gray area. There is constant fight between American companies wanting to work with our data and, of course, the European bureaucracy trying to stop that. And the only way to find some peace of mind, if you will, in this situation is introducing those security and compliance controls that work in real time, that can give you an overview of what's going on and what's not going on in your cloud infrastructure, and how can you always demonstrate that your data in the cloud is, well, I mean, if it's becomes kind of non-compliant for just 72 hours, you are in big troubles. You no longer have a year till your next review. That will be my biggest takeaway.
So I think Alexei, the compliance is important. I think the requirements is very, very critical here. Now let's really go into the next. What are the best practices, and what would security professionals and data architects, right, need to be aware of, and then what do they need to take action, right, to get the full insights and leveraging the data power from these applications and these platforms. So let's go through that list of things. Alexei, if you can, please continue some of these areas as well.
Yeah, so when we talk about securing data, we have gone kind of a long way from the original perimeter-focused ideology. Let's protect our infrastructure. Let's build a wall. Let's build like a castle wall with a moat around our data. And we soon found out that this approach no longer works because there is no wall anymore. There is no perimeter. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, data has to move. Data has to live in multiple places now. So there was this idea that somehow data, the security should become data-centric. So we no longer focus on plugging the holes in our infrastructure. We somehow have to protect the data itself. And quite a few years ago, I don't remember, was it like 15 years or something ago, there was this great new idea. Data must be self-describing and defending. Data should be protected in a way that's consistent across different systems, environments, technology stacks. And the only way to achieve it is by doing it through policies. So there is just supposed to be one common language describing how to protect your data based on various attributes of the data, like sensitivity, geography, and so on. And somehow those controls have to operate in accord and ensure this consistent coverage at any time, at any place, at rest, in transit, and ideally even in use. The question, of course, is how do we achieve that? Since you cannot put all of your data in a safe anymore, and you cannot put every network packet in a tiny safe to let it move around. So that you have to make compromises. And the first of those kind of foundational ideas was you have to know what exactly you are protecting. So you have to start with data discovery, classification, and usability. You have to know where all your data lives across all the environments, across all the systems. And then on that foundation, you build these policy-based controls, which would hopefully provide the full consistent coverage. That's, in a nutshell, the idea of data-centric security. Of course, it's pure theory. The way it can be implemented practically varies a lot among different vendors, and this is why we have this whole alphabet soup of various technologies, DSPMs and DAMs and DSMs and whatever, and we will talk about that later as well. So let's see how it will actually be put into practice.
I have to also assume, Alexei, all the solution has to work frictionless for data consumers. At the end of the day, the data has to be, made available to the, for data analysts and, data engineers and, for various applications. That's going to be the, the right solution with the right architecture, will be, I'm assuming, is the key here. And Mark, if you have any thoughts around that, right? How would one, go about it, right? While putting the policies in place and getting the data to the right people.
Yeah, I mean, it's just hard with today's modern data stack, right? There's really a kind of a hole in the middle, because everything that Alexei described in terms of the theory of how you want to do that is exactly right. The problem is that all of these pieces don't holistically give you that the ability to go do that, right? And as you said at the end, the most important part is that has to be usable, right? Like what people are doing today typically is a combination of process, humans in the loop, and then, as you said, security is usually viewed as a tax, right? Because at the end of the day, the end goal is to get users to be able to use that data. And most of the bespoke things that are being done today kind of don't lead to this beautiful user experience, right? It's come, ask for data, go through some onerous process to get permissions, go through the soup of figuring it out. It's not really flowing as part of the data stack, the modern data stack that has made so much else easy and automated. This part of the equation is not, for sure.
Like really, the worst thing a security solution can do is get in the way.
Yes.
So if it can exist somewhere, ideally, it should not get in the way at all. It just do its job transparently, invisibly to any user. An ideal security solution is one that does not exist, right?
It is tough, yeah. I think you also touched on, in addition to, the frictionless story, I think the right architecture is important here. You also talked about the people, right? You talked about CDOs and CIOs and CISOs. There is many people involved. There's a businesses, there's a data team, there is a technical teams, in a given company, right? That's typically how they work. Is there one person responsible, or what's the collaborative nature here we're looking for? Perhaps Alexei, maybe you could take that first and then have Mark comment on.
Well, this is perhaps the second biggest question for in any area of cybersecurity. Who is going to pay for it? Who is going to own it in the end? And the problem is, as we kind of slowly finding out nowadays, this approach no longer works. I mean, okay, there is always someone who is paying, but you can no longer expect that there will be one stakeholder in the entire company who would own and operate it. It will never work anymore. Ideally, again, everyone has to do it. And I'm not sure whether anyone of you is familiar with the actual story of the pike, the swan, and the crayfish, but I guess at least the metaphor itself speaks better than 1,000 words, basically. As long as you have different teams, different stakeholders in your company who are only concerned with their own requirements and goals, and they are pulling the security cart in different directions at the same time, it will never move. It just won't work anymore. So somehow they have to find the way to work together. ideally using the same tools, but at the very least using the same processes, talking the same language, using the same frameworks and guidelines, and even working together on writing those security policies. That's the ultimate goal.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think having the CISOs especially and then CDOs on the same page on from the top down, right, collaborating. Mark, you might have seen some of those things. Any thoughts around that? How people can collaborate?
Yeah, it's a very complicated world because, of course, yeah, at the top, it's the CISO, it's whoever's in charge of compliance for your company ends up being the one who, has to hold the reins and is going to get, the first line of, did you do what you're supposed to do? But the reality is no one holds all parts of the puzzle, right? And as the picture depicts, you all have your own goals, right? Different people are trying to put data into this mix. People are trying to pull data out of that mix at different ways and different times. There isn't always agreement on what solution to the problem should be, right? Like you may get a network engineering group that wants to come in and put in proxies everywhere. You may get the database group saying, no, we can solve it at our layer. You'll get the analytics groups who have their own desires of how to access data and their own solutions that they bring to the table, right? And that's where you end up with this mishmash of things, the different creatures pulling the cart in different directions, all with good intents, right? Like nowhere in here is someone saying this isn't important, this isn't what we want to get done. But you get the users who just want as frictionless access to data as possible. You get your security group who's like, the best way to keep security is to lock all the data in a closet and throw away the key, because then it's very secure. And it's just hard, right? Again, because there hasn't been a nice holistic way to wrap all this up for the goals that the business has, right? Because the business at the end of the day is the one that's held accountable with serious penalties, right? Like if we talk about the consequences of not being compliant here, if you look at GDPR alone, the consequences for a GDPR violation can range from 2 to 4% of your revenue, right? Which is a huge, if you're a good sized company, that's a huge impact.
Yeah. Looks like, I think if I re-summarize it, I think having a tool that brings them together would definitely be useful here, that answers questions for security people, is everything is as per policies implemented, and then allows data people to move fast. I think, that's the tool I think we probably need here. Alexei, it'll be good to know what type of capabilities would someone need, right? For a solution like this, to handle the complexities.
Well, what we can quickly discuss here is that leadership compass you mentioned earlier. So yeah, we call our market research documents leadership compasses, and we publish them on various topics. And the one here was data security platforms. That's one of those fairly recently emerged terms. It's not the latest one. The latest one is perhaps DSPM, which we will discuss separately. But yeah, these are the capabilities we believed at the time are crucial for every consistent data security platform. It's like a combination of proactive controls and runtime controls, access management, and threat prevention and analytics and visibility, you name it. The point is here, a truly comprehensive data security platform is basically a tool which has to do a lot of different capabilities. Some companies, some potential customers would argue, but we don't really need all of those. And my response would be, well, you don't need them all today, but you will find it sooner or later that you do need them, and you better be prepared for that in advance. Even if you consider this to be like an overkill of a requirement, at least I would definitely recommend people to go and read this document. I think you can access it on our website. The point here is, how to put it, like there's a lot of ground to cover. There is a lot of capabilities that can be developed individually, but they also have to somehow fit together, for the lack of a better word, holistically, in providing this consistent, unified visibility, understanding what's going on, and of course, threat detection, prevention, and response. Audit and compliance is just one of those capabilities. But of course, for some companies, it's like the only reason they would buy such a solution. Although, of course, I would argue those companies are doing compliance not exactly right. I mean, compliance should never be your goal. Compliance is a nice frosting on the cake whenever you're doing your security properly. But yeah, we can totally dive into our findings and maybe even talk about how we rated TrustLogic's data security plan as well.
So I think in interest of time, I think one thing I want to just ask a question around this capabilities is a performance. There is reason many companies are going to cloud is a huge, not only the cost, but also the massively scales, right? The architectures of separation of storage and the compute. You can run millions and millions of queries within few seconds. That's really how performant these systems are. Mark, I think, one of the things that, that love to hear your thoughts there is, when you apply the security, right, you cannot just start blocking, performance becomes an issue for this analyst. And we talked about already, there is no one solution, industry standard there. Any thoughts there, right from the early on, right, what would someone need to keep in mind as they look for these capabilities? Are they looking for the solution? Any thoughts around that performance and scalability?
Yeah, for sure. It starts with, again, the perfect security is one that fades into the background. It's just there, right? If it takes, extra steps and takes away performance, then people are going to find ways to go around the security, not because they're trying to be insecure, it's because they're trying to get their job done, right? And so you can't, back in the day, it was, again, you put all in a vault and you would lock it down. You'd either put it all in one place and lock it up really tightly. You would put a proxy in place, right? Like this was when the web first came around, this is what you did. You shoved everything through a reverse proxy on the way out and an inbound proxy on the way in. It doesn't really work in this world anymore, right? Like, there's too many points to do. There's too many clients. Like, where do you even put a proxy unless you go all the way down to the network layer? And then the performance, as you said, like these systems have gotten faster and faster and faster, and that's awesome. That only works if you can actually get access to the system, right? The more layers you put in between, if you make you bounce, as the old saying, there's no problem that you can't solve with another layer of indirection. The more layers of indirection you put, every one of those layers adds a performance penalty and a scalability penalty, right? It's not useful to have an infinitely scalable database if you have a very limited scalability on a permissions front end that gates your access to that database, right? So the solution really has to work with those amazing systems that have now been provided at the back end, not, layer on top of them or work against them.
Yeah, also makes sense. I think that's the key. What we hear is, you start with something small data sets, but you start building it out and you go in 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, right? Then your data suddenly grows so much, and you got so many users, so many data platforms, so many use cases coming in. Implementing access controls is key there, but also at the same time, the performance becomes a top criteria there. Thank you, Mark. Alexei, any other guidance, around this capabilities? Otherwise, we can quickly move forward as well.
Well, I maybe just add a couple of words, kind of that performance and scalability doesn't necessarily translate into numbers like transactions per second. I mean, sure, those are important as well, but kind of I would argue that it all boils down to user experience in the end, right? Because unless you're like with the exception of very specific use cases like, I don't know, real-time stock trading operations or whatever, where you actually have to shave off every microsecond, most of the time you actually deliver your data to people. So performance and scalability also means it translates into what people now call UX. productivity of real people. And of course, now you have to add this entirely new facet of AI into the mix, because right now everyone is talking about LLMs and retrieval augmented generation and whatever vector embedding. So you have to throw in new capabilities, and you have to do it quickly, and you have to do it in a way that, well, basically your users are demand. And security and not getting in the way is like extremely important nowadays. It's probably like the biggest, or rather, what we can see now is basically people would rush to adopt a chatbot in their existing application, completely disregarding any existing security policies, because, well, chatbots are so cool. And this is exactly what we have to address. This is all kind of consequences of that performance and scalability concept.
Great. Thank you.
Okay,
So
so
you
yes,
wanna-
TrustLogix was also one of the around 20 vendors we have reviewed in our leadership compass. And of course, as you just rightfully mentioned, kind of performance and scalability was one of the things we have ranked with the highest note. And yeah, you can see at the spider graph on the right, those 8 capabilities we have identified. And here we know that kind of this solution does not cover them all. And this is, I guess, one of the consequences of doing it out of band and only focusing on securing native security controls within existing data platforms. So you cannot focus on data-centric security and at the same time invest a lot in like infrastructure vulnerability management. Sometimes you have to make decisions and sacrifice something for the sake of higher performance, ease of deployment, better compliance coverage, and so on. But yeah, what can I say? It's a really capable solution.
I think one of the things if I could add, Alexis, I think you touched in the previous slide as well, is having the right security governance, right? The monitoring and continuously keeping an eye on, how data is used, who is using it, what they're sharing it with, right? It's just not access controls only, right? But also having that the security overlay. I think that's a foundational, I believe. Without that, you can access control, you can implement it, but then, people come and go, right? Projects move on, people leave the jobs, people who move their projects, they still have access to the data. They still have access to the, permissions, right? So I'm assuming, Mark, you probably have seen these cases, right? Things are moving so fast and people just change, and the cloud is becoming now everyone can access it. It's easy to share data, easy to collaborate, right? Without having the right security governance, including for AI applications, right? I believe that's foundational. Is that, Mark, do you agree with that in general, right? Having the right security governance?
Yes, it is super important. It is just to touch on one aspect of that. It's hard enough to get access to data. It's nearly impossible to revoke as you should, right? Like everyone wants to glom on. You always ask for data. You never volunteer to give that data back. Usually the processes are not great at tracking the fact that, hey, you changed departments, so you shouldn't have access to that data. Nor do people, like if you ask people if they want their data rights revoked, they'll say no. Like, I may want that data again. That was useful to me at one point in time, and I know it'll be hard to get back. And so of course I want to keep it, right? So all of that's very hard to keep track with the dynamic environment, right? You have data sources coming and going, you have people coming and going, you have people just changing roles. And also, as you learn more about your business, you learn more about your data and decide that data should be provisioned differently, right? That data, again, when you're small, one policy, one access method may be sufficient. But as you get bigger, as your data gets bigger, as your business gets more attention, those rules change. It is very, very hard to keep up with that dynamic environment. And yet that is the nature of the game, right? Like compliance means you're actually doing all of these things.
Yeah,
Great. Let's so
actually,
Becky, let's
I just want to say we are wandering basically into this whole governance territory now, right? Access governance, the magic word everybody is talking about. And there are so many, I mean, for example, we at KuppingerCole, we have like separate teams working just on this whole idea, the whole notion of identity governance, for example, access governance. There are specialized solutions which are designed only to do that one thing, how to tackle your role explosion and stuff like that, how to revoke your unnecessary entitlements. There are tools, there are entire class of solutions for it. The question is like, do you really, like, does every organization in every size and every industry have enough expertise to do it on that high strategic level? Or would they benefit from a more specialized, leaner solution, which only does it, for example, on the data access level? This is exactly what we are talking about today, right?
Yeah. So, folks, any questions? Definitely post it. I think we've got a few questions from the from people submitted. We couldn't be on the webinar here. So one of the things is, what's the right step, right? If someone needs to start addressing these challenges, where would they start? Would they start day zero? Would they start after 6 months of project? Any specific guidance there? And then the second question associated with that is, should they build it internally versus should they just look for a solution outside, from third-party partners? Maybe Mark, you can take it, and then Alex, you can comment on that question.
Yeah, happy to dive in. You can never start too early. You should be thinking about this from the very beginning when you implement, right? Of course, in a perfect world, that would be the first thing you would start with before you even stand up a database. That's not reality. Most people will already have a bunch of data floating around before they come to this problem. So acknowledge what reality looks like. But the bottom line is, if you aren't paying attention from as early as you can, you're just going to be digging the hole deeper and deeper by the time you wake up and try to back into some kind of a solution. So you really need to be thinking about that and thinking about it in a holistic way on what this means for your business with the goals in mind, right? Of course, the top has to be securing data properly, doing, both your legal and, kind of moral responsibility for the data that you have, but then also the legal and the penalties for your company if you don't kind of do what you should be doing anyway. So that's one. On the, should you build it yourself? Should you buy? Like, as always, you should spend your time where your time is best spent, right? Like, and, unless you are in the business of building a data security product, you probably should not be building a data security solution. At the same time, like, you are responsible for the pieces you put together and making sure this all comes together, right? So, you should find the right balance of where you spend your time, most importantly, right? Like, there's, especially in these times of tight budgets, it's easy to say, well, I'm going to reduce my capital spend. That's not, in any area, that's not the wisest way to optimize, right? Your most important spend is the time, and back to Alexi's point, the user experience of your people, right? Like, it's one thing to say, great, well, I save my capital expense. But if that was at the cost of having a subpar implementation, of having a user experience where your users can't get to data, that's very much being, penny wise and pound foolish.
Yeah, thank you. So there are a couple of questions coming up. Let me take, I think the first question has two parts. The first part is, have you seen data solutions become unnecessarily complicated as everyone wants to work on newest technologies that promises to do something better? I mean, Mark, maybe you can comment on that.
Yeah, I'll take that one.
Yeah.
Yes, unnecessarily, of course, is in the eye of the beholder. That user who wants to pick up the shiniest database because it does whatever the fastest, of course, doesn't think it's unnecessary. From a data group and a data governance group, they may very much think it's unnecessary. But back to where we started, yeah, it gets complicated, right? Because whether you think it's necessarily complicated or not, users are going to bring their own data stores to the party, and then you need to figure out how to integrate that into your story. And as we started with, that's a feature, not a bug, right? If you try to quash that and say you can never bring in another data source, you're defeating the purpose.
Yeah, no, I think one of the things we hear that, and we've seen that this question ongoing basis. The other thing I also hear is, yes, you are excited to build something new, but also there is a security team in the company that says, no, hold on, you cannot take the data and experiment with new technologies unless there is a validation of security, right? So there's a little bit of a blocker things comes up, and they need to make sure that they have a right solution around that security as well. And then that's where I think the part two question comes in. How does TrustLogix deal with customers, right? Needing some new technologies like this. And this is really where we believe that we can partner with our customers. And, we are a partner of Snowflake and, various other data platform vendors, including AWS and Tableaus and other worlds. We are constantly, doing the beta testing and alpha testing with these vendors, and then we're getting ready our solution, for these new capabilities. Yeah, we have been doing that. It's a journey, and then the data vendors are making it so easy to use data, and we are totally supportive of that, and then making sure that we make that securely, possible. Definitely connect with us, to discuss some of these things. I think that was a part two. I'll take another question from the list here. This is from Piyush. Hey, Piyush. His question is, data sprawl is considered as problem, which is about accumulation of large amount of data from multiple sources across different storages. How this can be related to data lake, which also contain entire organization data at centralized place. Any one of you, Mark or Alexei, take that?
Well,
comment on that?
there is this famous webcomic called XKCD, and they have a very famous one panel about having 14 competing standards, and then someone invents a new one to supersede them all, and then you have 15 competing standards. I guess it applies exactly the same here. A data lake as a concept was perhaps an attempt to tackle this data sprawl, but say, yeah, but we will just throw all of our data in one bucket and we'll work from there. In reality, it almost never works like that. You might have copies of your data in the data lake, but the originals, that source of truth data, if you will, still resides somewhere else. And now, instead of just kind of having to deal with data sprawl with one place, you deal with data sprawl in two places. So sometimes I guess it can be beneficial for specific use cases like analytics, but in a bigger picture of things, it would only add more complexity.
Yeah, I'll pile on Alexei's answer there. Data lakes are great. They're super, it's a very interesting and useful technical invention. It does not solve the problem. And as Alexei said, in some ways it complicates it, because yes, the data lake is not the source of truth for any of that data, right? And rarely do you get rid of the source of truth to have the data sitting in your data lake. And so again, that doesn't mean data lakes are bad. They're very useful for a whole bunch of things, but they are not also the solution to the problem.
Thank you. I think, we got another 5 minutes left here. I think we need to start wrapping it up. I'll also answer the other question. I think there was one question on the cost perspective. What will be the difference? I do think that, in our experience, what we have seen is, there is underestimation that happens, as we talked about early on. Engineers may think that they can build it out, unless they have a large team of experts that understand the security and policies. Mark talked about converting policies from legal, right? Implementing the right access controls. Unless you have a large team of people, I think the cost is very justified having a third-party solution, because you can focus on your data and not focus on trying to solve these problems. And then also we talked about the performance and complexities of compliance requirements, and the business, changing dynamically, right? You got to, be aware of all the rules that you need to implement. So happy to have a discussion offline on that. But I do suggest that what we have seen based on some customers, in the beginning, some of our customers told us that they could implement it on their own, but 6 months down the road, they came back to us and they wanted to have a discussion. So, um, definitely reach out offline. I think, I've got one slide here that talks about trust logics. And then there is a next slide, there is a information about how to reach us. Definitely schedule a demo or, have a discussion with us. Allowed to have those discussions. With that said, we'll wrap it up here. Thank you so much, Mark and Alexi, for your time. And definitely it's enlightening. For me, I think there are a few things that you guys talked about: the architecture, having the right architecture, having the right access controls, um, uh, and then the performance wise, having the the scalable story, right, is definitely takeaways from this.